People often say the internet is written in ink, but for those at the top, there has always been a delete button that money can afford. For almost a decade now, we've watched as certain parts of Meghan Markle's story seem to disappear, wiped from search engines and buried beneath layers of carefully managed PR. But in 2026, that ink isn't fading anymore, it's permanent. A huge archive of high-definition photos has just come to light, and these aren't the grainy, low-quality images people have debated over for years. These are crisp, detailed, and impossible to ignore. They don't look like tabloid grabs or paparazzi shots. Instead, they feel like they came straight from the private clouds of the people who were actually there. Shit. It's a digital shockwave that's left everyone asking the same question: who finally chose to unlock the vault? What makes these 2026 leaks hit even harder is the timing. Just as the Duchess is trying to rebrand herself with a more relatable lifestyle image, focused on cooking, simplicity, and homegrown aesthetics, these photos pull her back into a world of extreme, untouchable wealth. They reveal a version of her past that doesn't align with the story of a struggling actress climbing her way up through determination alone. Instead, we're looking at someone who was already moving within the highest circles of global influence long before royal life entered the picture. The conversation has shifted. It's no longer just about rumors of a yacht girl past. It's about a broader pattern of access and connections that's been hiding in plain sight all along. The moment these images surfaced online, the reaction, especially on TikTok, was immediate and intense. Digital forensic analysts began enhancing the photos using AI tools, and what they uncovered is striking. Faces are now clearly visible, luxury labels can be identified, and even the names of the yachts can be read in the background. This level of clarity makes old denial tactics almost impossible to maintain. It's clear that someone wanted this chapter of her life brought back into the spotlight, and they waited until she believed it was long buried before revealing it. To really understand the impact of these leaks, we need to go back to what many call the Mediterranean olden season of 2010. At that time, Meghan was still working as an actress in Los Angeles, taking on smaller roles and guest appearances. On paper, her career reflected someone still trying to find her place in Hollywood. But these newly surfaced 2026 images tell a very different story. They place her in Monaco during the Grand Prix, and Saint-Tropez at the height of summer, and aboard yachts that cost more to operate for a week than many actors earn in years. This wasn't just casual travel. It was immersion in a world of elite networking at the highest level. Naturally, the first question people ask is about cost. A weekend in Monaco during the Grand Prix isn't just expensive, it's out of reach for nearly everyone. You don't simply buy your way into the circle seen in these photos. You're invited. You're brought in because someone believes you belong there. Further analysis of the 2010 images appears to show Meghan on yachts typically reserved for Saudi royals and powerful figures in global finance. Now, sources connected to these Gulf elite circles are beginning to speak more openly. According to them, Meghan wasn't just blending into the background. She was there with intention, building connections that linked her Los Angeles life to an international network of power that most people only read about in fiction. But what really stands out is the consistency. These weren't isolated appearances. Leaks suggest a repeated presence across multiple years, moving between Monaco, Cannes, and the Mediterranean coast with ease. This wasn't someone visiting once. This was someone who seemed to belong, and that raises bigger questions. Who was opening these doors? Who was covering the costs? And why, when she later became a duchess, did this entire chapter appear to vanish from the public narrative? These 2026 images aren't just snapshots. They form a timeline of a life that was never meant to be fully visible. It's important to understand that the world of high-end yachts and private Mediterranean gatherings is one of the most exclusive environments on the planet. Access is tightly controlled. Yacht owners, often billionaires or royalty, don't allow just anyone on board. They rely on facilitators to curate the guest list, ensuring every person fits a specific profile. Attractive, discreet, and able to navigate the unspoken rules of elite society. Now in 2026, that silence around these facilitators is beginning to crack. People who once operated inside these networks are starting to describe a highly controlled system, one where attendees were carefully selected based on very specific criteria. And according to these leaked photos, Meghan appears right at the center of that system. She doesn't look out of place. She looks comfortable, confident, completely at ease. Insiders say access like this doesn't happen randomly. It usually requires someone with influence to vouch for you, someone willing to risk their own reputation to bring you into that world. This is the point where names like Marcus Anderson and the Soho House Group begin resurfacing in the discussion. According to the leaks, the kind of curated access Meghan experienced in her earlier years wasn't achieved. It appears to have been the result of a deliberate, high-level networking approach. What stands out in this newly surfaced material is the level of discretion that surrounded these environments. These gatherings were never intended for public view. They were private, tightly controlled spaces where some of the world's most powerful individuals could operate away from scrutiny. So the fact that these images are emerging now in 2026 suggests something significant. The trust within that circle has been broken. Someone who was present on those yachts, someone who is part of that carefully managed system, has chosen to come forward. And historically, when those who safeguard elite secrets begin to leak, it usually means the dynamics behind the scenes have shifted. One of the most striking aspects of the 2026 revelations is the direct connection to Saudi and Gulf state elite networks. These aren't casual affiliations. These are circles known for enforcing some of the strictest privacy standards in the world. What happens in those environments, especially in private yacht settings in places like Monaco, is meant to remain hidden indefinitely. Yet, the newly released images place Meghan in settings clearly associated with these powerful Middle Eastern figures. You're seeing glimpses of restricted access areas, private lounges, exclusive decks, invitation-only gatherings that are almost never exposed to the public. Now, voices from within these international circles are beginning to share more. They claim that between 2008 and 2012, during those so-called yacht years, Meghan developed ongoing relationships with individuals connected to Gulf elite network. This wasn't about attending a single event. It was about sustaining a presence over time. Maintaining that kind of access requires more than just an introduction. It demands trust, consistency, and a reputation for discretion. You have to be someone who can navigate the unspoken expectations of that world. The images show her returning to the same Mediterranean hotspots year after year, often alongside the same facilitators, figures known for bridging Western entertainment talent with Eastern wealth. It's this repetition that's fueling the current conversation in 2026. It points toward a structured pattern rather than random appearances. As people continue analyzing the backgrounds of these photos, they're starting to identify individuals with major influence in global industries like energy and finance. Naturally, this raises a bigger question. What exactly was the nature of these relationships? Were they purely social, or were they part of a broader positioning strategy that ultimately played a role in her rise from relative obscurity in Hollywood to someone who would later attract royal attention? Now we come to the most sensitive dimension of this 2026 investigation, what many are referring to as the darker side of the yacht circuit. For years, there have been quiet rumors suggesting that these Mediterranean networks overlapped with some highly controversial figures. These were environments where serious allegations have at times surfaced involving members of the global elite. Within the 2026 leak, certain images appear to place Meghan in the same locations and at the same types of events where individuals like Prince Andrew were reportedly present. It's important to be precise here. The photos do not show her in any explicitly compromising situation. However, they do indicate a level of proximity that raises difficult questions in light of her current public image. What's being revealed is a world where the boundaries between high society networking and situations involving legal scrutiny can sometimes blur. The documentation tied to these leaks points out that the concern isn't necessarily about direct involvement, but about shared environments. These were spaces frequented by individuals who are now under intense public examination. The term yacht girl has often been used to oversimplify or dismiss these discussions, but the emerging evidence paints a more layered picture. It suggests that the story goes beyond parties. It's about proximity to powerful and, in some cases, controversial figures, because when you find yourself in the same spaces as some of the most influential and sometimes most scrutinized people in the world, questions naturally follow. What did you witness? What did you know? The fact that these images remained hidden for so long points to something else. Silence that may have been carefully maintained, whether through agreements, influence, or mutual interest. But in 2026, that silence appears to be breaking. As public attention grows around these resurfaced connections, some are beginning to question whether past efforts to clean up her image were less about protecting her personally and more about shielding the institution she later became part of from what she might have been exposed to. There's a particular turning point in this timeline where everything seems to shift: 2011. This was the year Meghan Markle secured her role as Rachel Zane on the TV series Suits. To the outside world, it looked like the classic breakthrough story, an aspiring actress finally getting her big opportunity. But when viewed through the lens of the 2026 leaks, that transition begins to take on a different meaning. Prior to 2011, the images suggest she was already operating within elite international circles, building connections in Monaco and engaging with Gulf state networks. Then, almost instantly, everything changes. She goes from that world to landing a leading role in a major cable drama filmed in Toronto. For years, people in the industry have questioned how that casting came together because the backstory was never fully clear. It didn't follow the usual Hollywood trajectory of gradual visibility and steady progression. Now, new questions are being raised. Could those elite connections have helped open the right doors? Did someone she crossed paths with in Monaco or Saint-Tropez influence the decision behind the scenes? In an industry where connections often outweigh credentials, the timing feels almost too precise to ignore. The conversation in 2026 is now centered on the unseen forces behind her career rise. The 2010 images capture her at the height of her networking phase, and by 2011, she secured a stable, high-profile role. To many observers, it resembles a transition point, a shift from the world of international yachting into a more professionally recognized space. It's as if one chapter quietly handed off to the next. A move that allowed her to present a completely different image, someone now immersed in work, no longer visible in those exclusive yacht settings. But what the 2026 leaks make clear is that the past didn't vanish. It simply stayed hidden, waiting for the right moment to reappear. You can't examine Meghan's past without bringing up Marcus Anderson. He's been a consistent figure in her life for well over a decade and is widely known as the person who introduced her to Prince Harry. But according to the 2026 material, his role appears to go far beyond friendship. He can be seen in the background of several of the most exclusive yacht images, seemingly acting as a connector, bridging the gap between entertainment figures and powerful global elites. And that leads directly into the role of Soho House. Soho House isn't just a members-only club, it's a global network built on discretion and a carefully managed access. It's the ideal environment for individuals who need to move between influential circles without attracting media attention. The 2026 photos suggest that Meghan was deeply embedded within this inner Soho House network long before she became widely known. This is a world where nothing is left to chance. Introductions are intentional, calculated. You don't accidentally meet a prince in a place like Soho House. You're positioned to meet him. The presence of Nick Jones, the founder of Soho House, as a guest of honor at the royal wedding highlights just how powerful and connected this network truly is. To many, it looks like a textbook example of strategic networking success, leveraging access to move from elite social environments into the center of the British monarchy. But the 2026 leaks are now revealing the other side of that story. They suggest that this rise was built on a foundation of discretion and hidden connections, elements that are now being brought into public view. As people examine the images of Marcus and Meghan together in those private settings, they're beginning to see what looks like a blueprint, a carefully navigated path to influence that appears far more intentional than previously acknowledged. So, why are these photos creating such a storm right now in 2026? Because Meghan is currently in the middle of a major rebrand. Over the past few years, she's been working to step away from royal controversies and reposition herself as a relatable lifestyle figure. The image being presented is one of simplicity, cooking at home, making jam, focusing on family life in California. But the sudden appearance of these yacht images creates a sharp contrast. It's difficult to maintain a relatable persona when high-definition photos show you in ultra-exclusive settings aboard luxury yachts in Monaco. The disconnect is immediate and hard to reconcile. What this creates is a gap in trust, one that's not easily repaired. The 2026 leaks are in real time challenging the credibility of that rebrand. Every piece of content promoting a simple lifestyle is now met with questions about the Mediterranean years and the parts of her past that seem to disappear. For many in the public, it feels like they were given only part of the story, and the timing of these leaks doesn't seem random. It feels targeted, aimed directly at her current business ventures. Whoever chose to release these images appears to understand that the most effective way to disrupt her new narrative is to bring attention back to the original version of Meghan Markle, the version that was already navigating power, access, and elite networks long before entering royal life. It's a reminder that no matter how much a narrative evolves, the original records still exist. And in 2026, those records are being used to question the authenticity of everything she now presents. As these images continue to circulate across major platforms, one detail stands out more than anything else: the silence from the Sussex camp. Typically, when old claims or misleading narratives resurface, there's a swift response: statements, clarifications, sometimes even legal action. But in the case of these 2026 leaks, there has been nothing. No denials, no added context, no attempt to push back, just silence. And in the world of high-stakes public relations, silence often carries its own meaning. If there were a simple explanation, if these were just harmless trips or casual friendships, it likely would have been addressed already. The absence of any response suggests something more complicated. It hints that responding could risk drawing out even more damaging material. Because if these images are challenged, there's always the possibility that more could be released, perhaps even more revealing than what's already public. Right now, the public is interpreting that silence as avoidance. They're seeing someone who usually has a response for everything suddenly offering none. And as the images continue to trend, the lack of explanation is becoming the biggest headline of all. What we're witnessing is a situation that's rapidly escalating, one that shows no signs of slowing down. And it's escalating for one key reason: the legal pressure that once kept these stories contained doesn't seem to hold up against evidence this clear and this detailed. The public is watching closely, and the continued silence is only fueling more curiosity. The biggest question now is simple: what comes next? If someone had the patience to hold on to this material until 2026, it strongly suggests they're not finished. These images feel less like a conclusion and more like the first move. They've mapped out the timeline, confirmed the level of access, and revealed a side of Meghan Markle that was never meant to resurface. But if someone was present on those yachts and had the ability to document it, then it's unlikely they only have photos. There's growing speculation that the next wave could include far more: documents, travel logs, or even firsthand testimonies from individuals who were actually there. That's the worst-case scenario for the Duchess, a situation where the long-standing discretion of elite circles finally breaks, exposing the full scope of those years. The connections, the exchanges, the relationships, all laid out in the open. The 2026 leaks have already shifted the narrative permanently. This is no longer being framed as a fairy tale rise or a story of struggle. Instead, it's being discussed as a calculated, high-stakes ascent that may have started on the decks of private Mediterranean yachts. The vault is no longer closed, and for the first time in years, the public feels like it has access. As more material surfaces and more insiders begin to speak, the real question isn't whether the story will continue. It's how much more of Meghan Markle's past is still waiting to be revealed. Because at the end of the day, it's difficult to build a new narrative on top of buried secrets, especially when those secrets refuse to stay hidden. What also sets 2026 apart isn't just what's being released, but how it's being presented. These images aren't vague or questionable. They're backed by verified metadata and even blockchain timestamps showing exactly when and where they were captured. Claims of AI manipulation or deepfakes don't hold the same weight here. The digital signatures are too precise, and the clarity is high enough to pick out fine details like watch serial numbers or the vintage of the champagne being served. This is evidence presented at a forensic level, entering the public space without passing through traditional media filters, the very gatekeepers that once helped shape and protect these narratives. What we're seeing is a kind of decentralization of information, something the elite weren't fully prepared to deal with.